started. We want to respect your time. We have the last three people fill out name tags, so by the time I'm done wagging my lip here, they'll be in and ready for Mr. Marbut. So thank you for coming. If I haven't met you, my name is Craig. I'm the director at Bridge Street Mission, and this is the night of our gala, which is our annual banquet for Bridge Street Mission. We have 401 people coming tonight, which we're really excited about. And Mr. Robert Marbut, Dr. Robert Marbut, was our keynote speaker. And first of all, I was very grateful that he was willing to come to town, because he's a busy man that usually interacts with much larger contexts than a small 6 or 7 year old rescue mission in a town in northern Wisconsin. So he was willing to come, and I didn't want to be selfish and keep him to myself. I wanted him to share with the community. And so what I'd like to do, Dr. Marbut, is I'd like to do my best as a fairly newcomer to introduce you to the city of Wausau. All right? And this is through my filter, so I could be wrong. You might disagree with this. But and these numbers may not be right either, and so just, yeah, whatever. We could get two of you up here if you want, and we could bring a third chair in. There's enough room, so you can all be together. We don't want to break up the seat up. Why don't you grab this chair, bring this in, and you all be together. So first of all, Dr. Marbut, Wausau is a city, and see how close I am here, of about 38,000 people. 39?
6 fewer than 40,000 now.
We're over 40,000?
Almost to 40.
Almost to 40. All right, so I was wrong about that. There's a metro area of probably about 80,000, and a county of about 135,000. All right, somewhere in that range. But my observations in the 3 years from here, trying to address the homeless situation here in Wausau, I've learned that Wausau has a compassionate mayor who views the unhoused population as people to represent and not a problem to solve. And so I've really appreciated getting to know you, Katie. Wausau also has a police department where you hung out today that treats people, including the unhoused, with respect, and they've allocated resources to have a staff person that outreaches to them, all right? Now, my context of other places is cities like Cleveland, New York, Philadelphia, all right? So I know my standard of what I saw in policing was fairly low in those cities compared to what I saw here. So I've been amazed by that. Wausau also has nonprofits that communicate and work together, and it seems like they generally like each other. All right, at least that's how people have treated me. Wausau is also a generous community that want to invest in things that work. And I've learned that as I've interacted with folks here. But Wausau has somewhere between 300 and 400 people who are experiencing a housing crisis. All right, and that is data that we've collected over 3 years through our outreach center, where Alan and Ben serve, but it kind of mirrors what I've heard Tracy say as well. So obviously we still need some help in this community. And so then Wausau, I want to introduce you to Dr. Marbut. He's worked in 3 different presidential administrations. And at one time, he was the executive director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, one of those big, long Washington, D.C. titles. Basically, that for a while, he served as the homeless czar, if you would put in other words to say that. But he's also helped hundreds of different communities as he's traveled around and agencies to dramatically reduce homelessness. He's also the executive director of a movie called No Address. All right, and that's going to be released in September?
September's the movie, documentary's May.
Okay, there's a documentary and then a theater movie. And so when that comes out, we're going to be hosting a red carpet event here in Wausau at the Mission. And this really, I'm excited about this because this really humanizes the homeless situation. So we're very excited for this to come out. So they've been working hard on that. This morning, Dr. Marbut toured Wausau, so we could firsthand meet some of the people working with the homeless community, see where the homeless gather and so forth. And then finally, I wanted Dr. Marbut to come because I heard him make a presentation to rescue missions, of which Bridge Street Mission is a rescue mission, on some of the best practices that we should be considering if we're going to offer safe places and safe spaces. And I was very impressed by his conclusions, the principles that he shared, and so I'm so glad that he's willing to come and share with us. So I'm going to invite you to come up and share. This is going to be interactive, all right? So that's why we tried to slant so you could kind of see each other's faces. And then toward the end, I have really 4 really good raffle prizes for you. And so that's why you have those tickets, and we'll do that toward the end. So, Dr. Marbut.
Thank you very much. Some of you I met in the last day. We also toured last night, and then I went out on my own last night, and then early this morning too. I met some of you today, some of you I haven't. What I'd like to do, because they allocated 2 hours, but we were doing like a bathroom break at like 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I'm like, do that, everybody will leave after that. So what we'll do is let me go for about 45 minutes to, from clock time here, let me go about 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. Because Q&A, I'd like to do about 50-50 Q&A, because Q&A is always great, because you've read all the mean, ugly stuff about me, and then you think it's that. And then I was doing a radio show the other day, and with this guy from Berkeley, he's from the sort of edge of the Black Panther movement. That's who he was, pretty famous guy. Well, actually a really famous guy in the community. And he also lives in Birmingham, England. So he has these 2 interesting shows. So he got on, we're going about 20 minutes. He says, "You're not nearly the devil everybody says you are." And he says, "I was told, why I was asked last night, why were you inviting me to the show?" And I said, "Hey, no worries. I was told last night to cancel on you. I shouldn't be on your show." And he was like, "Oh," and then we went on another 20 minutes, and then at the end he says he's going to name his next kid after me. So, total true story. You're going to see it on the podcast when it comes out. He said, "I'm keeping that in." And so I appreciate the people who come and listen and have a dialogue, because I'm a provocateur. I get it. I get it. When Homeless First came out in 2010 as an idea, then became formal government in 2013, I was in a speech and I didn't know there was that many TV cameras in the room. And I said, "This is pretty much one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard in my entire life." And so that became the start, because right off the top of my mind, it was. I didn't think, as a clinician, in one of my degrees of psychology, and I've spent a lot of time in this space, is I couldn't imagine how you're going to get recovery with no treatment. I just couldn't see that as a logical deal. That's like, go to the ER and don't get any tests, don't get any assessment, don't get any treatment, but I hope you get better. That's literally what I saw Housing First as initially. And I've grown to realize Housing First works for about 8% of the population, not 100%. And there's 8% where it does work for at a clinical level. But that got me on a road of back and forth. And then by the time it became law in 2013, I was sort of the leading, this is the dumb movement or whatever, and I probably shouldn't have used those sorts of words. And in 2013, as a reminder, when the NOFA changed, that's the official change, and if I use too many acronyms, hit me and I'll go and explain it. But in 2013, the NOFA formally changed the federal policy to Housing First, and it did a lot of things. Couple things not so bad, 2 or 3 okay, but 2 or 3 really bad things. The first is it stopped funding wraparound services. number one, just the government is gonna move out of that business. We're gonna cannibalize all the money in services, mental health, behavioral health, substance use, job training, ID recovery, all that, and we're gonna cannibalize that money so we can produce more housing vouchers. That was why it was done. There was some logic to it. I disagree with the logic, but that was the logic. That's why they moved it over. The other thing is they discontinued the ability to have participation requirements. So before 2013, an agency was allowed to have participation requirements. After 2013, you were not allowed to it. In fact, they made it illegal for you to have participation requirements. And then there were several other things that it did, but the third was a really interesting one. Pre-2013, you got grants from the federal government based on how good you were at service delivery and how good you were at getting people out of homelessness. After 2013, it became, how fast can you give somebody a key? And literally that was the change. It was that dramatic. If you go, and if you ever want to read it, I carry it on my palm, or my phone, I'm so old. I carry it on my iPhone, and I'll show you the page where it all changed everything. And so in 2013, I made a big speech, and I said, this is just not gonna work, because you're expecting recovery without treatment. And I've never heard of any of that ever happening. The medical world, the behavioral health world, the substance abuse world, never have heard that. And then they said, oh, well, we're not saying you can't do it, we're just saying it'll be voluntary, and once they stabilize and this and that, then they'll come and get treatment. Every place we've looked at, less than 5% of the people ever ask about services. That's 1 in 20. So that means 19 out of 20 you're writing off. And the one area that had the highest number, that just meant they asked about it, but that didn't mean the people providing housing actually told them where to go or hook them up. They just were asked. So we basically have said we're going to stop treating people in homelessness. So if you think of it as homelessness, then you're probably saying, well, that's not too bad. I'm still going to get them a house. We're going to get you a house. But for people in the field, I've even had some people, look at who you are, said, we practice housing first, but we have robust services and we do this and that. That's not housing first. Housing first means a voucher and no treatment. That's what the federal government's definition of this is. It's really become Section 8 housing with no rules. And it was all about getting more money to give more vouchers, so that was the plan for it. And so in 2013, I said, the math is not gonna work, it's gonna go, and we got there was a lot of media about it. And as a reminder, and I wanna make sure I get the dates exactly right for this so that you know. This is according to the package when Housing First got passed in the NOFA in 2013, that all veteran homelessness in America would end. All. By 2016, all chronic homelessness would end, period. 2020, all family homelessness would end. And by 2023, all homeless would end. That was the promises made. And so, real quickly, you started realizing it wasn't working. And then I'm clearly a lightning rod, so every newspaper started calling up, how's it going? How's it going? It's not working, not working. And then the other side said, well, the problem is you didn't give us enough money. Well, we are now spending 3.5 times more money than we did in 2013. So just almost 12 years, we've tripled our expenditures. Sometimes when you have a bad policy, spending more money on bad policy actually makes things worse, not better. It's there. So that's why I'm so controversial, because I thought it didn't make sense to me that you can get treatment and recovery without having them together. That's just my view. And the reason why I think that is, let's reminder of the life cycle of homelessness. I know nobody who lost a house and became homeless. I still haven't met a person yet that's lost a house first and then became homeless. Yet, you dig deeper. Here's what really happens for most people. They have an untreated, and I'm talking, and we're going to talk numbers here in a second, but untreated mental illness, I'm talking street level homelessness, and I'll hit those numbers in a sec. But the life cycle of homeless is untreated mental illness, self-medication, then maybe a little more exacerbation because now they have additional stress. You know, they might have hit the street a little bit. They might have lost their apartment. Then they start to lose their job because they don't show up regularly. You don't maintain a job. You don't hold the job. You lose your finances. When you lose your finances, you burn through all your credit cards. Then now you have a credit card thing. And then, by the way, you lose your apartment or housing about this time. Then you couch surf, you hang out with family, relatives until you burn all those bridges. Then you move to your car. We could have called this carlessness. I mean, car is almost one of the last things we lose. Not that house is sort of upstream. But we didn't lose the house or the car because we lost the house or car. We lost it because of untreated mental illness, self-medicating, don't go to work, can't afford it. Then you burn through your credit line, burn through your credit cards. Then you burn through your family. Then you burn through your friends. Now you get to us. That's a lot of steps, and it doesn't happen overnight. And I'm talking street level homelessness. So let me hit, and some people, some of you might know this, so I'm sorry if it's a refresher course. If you all know it, I apologize. The federal government has 10 definitions of homelessness. 5 at Department of Education, 5 at the Housing and Urban Development. There are a total of 10 definitions of homelessness. Street level homelessness is 2 of the HUD criteria merged together. So the number on Department of Education is 1.5 million children experiencing homeless by their 5 definitions. HUD has 1.2 million people experiencing homeless by their definition, if you read the AHAR, but they only talk about the 650,000. Because if you're the president and you're wanting to win a re-election, Republican or Democrat, 650 sounds better than almost 3 million. That's partly what's going on. Not totally, but partly what's going on. And the 650,000 you hear a lot about, that is the people literally living on the street, that's one category, or the people in and out of emergency shelter. And those 2 together are 650,000. So when you hear a number and somebody says to you, I know how to end homeless, or here's our homeless problem, I always ask, before we start, I ask every interview in newspaper, television, radio, is which group are you talking about? HUD, Ed, a subgroup, all homelessness, because there are 10 different types of homelessness and there are 10 different cohort paths to each of those. They're very unique. A veteran with post-traumatic stress versus a woman with domestic violence or economic divorce is totally different. A woman who is clean and sober but loses their housing because they broke up with knucklehead who was beating up on her or trying to have sex with one of the kids, and she breaks up to save her family and she's clean and sober, that's a real different deal than somebody who has untreated mental illness and substance abuse on the street. Yet what we have said in the federal government, this is fallout of 2013, is we have a one-size-fits-all and it will solve all homeless. If you literally read government stuff put out by HUD secretaries, HHS, VA secretaries, they all say, housing first will end all homeless. Well, it didn't. You know, these were numbers right out of the promissory note that was made when this was done. So we need to understand all homelessness cohorts are different. And then within the cohort, individual stories are different and they need to be customized. And the idea of one size fits all is the literal clinical equivalent of an ER or an emergency room department that says, we have an antibiotic. Come in, you got pneumonia. We don't care if it's viral or bacteria. We're going to use an antibiotic. It's going to work for one, not the other. By the way, if you have a broken leg, antibiotic. Heart attack, antibiotic. Stroke, antibiotic. But that's what we're doing. This is different. Homelessness is different. So when somebody says homeless, first question everybody should always say in a room like this and there is, what type of homeless are we talking about? Are we talking about adult male, street level? Is very different than a single mom, clean and sober with kids and has a knuckleheaded partner. Totally different. In fact, George Block, who spends a lot of time in this space, actually thinks if you do the treatment for the other, you make the other worse. It's that different. So let's start by understanding the numbers. The 650,000, that's 2 parts of HUD. That is now doubling every 5 years. That's what just came out in the report 2 months ago from the White House. It's doubling every 5 years. So that means think about these numbers. In 25 years, we'll have 10.4 million people approximately street level homeless in America. In 5 years, just 5, we're gonna have 1.2 million, 1.3 million, just in 5 years. Portland, Seattle, San Francisco have totally lost their cities. Any of you been there? It started by conventions stopped. Remember, medical conventions stopped, then tech conventions stopped, then Walmart started closing, Walgreens closing, CVS closing, and now they're hollowed out cities. If you've been to, those were 3 really beautiful communities in America. Beautiful, and they're gone. Honolulu beaches, if anybody's gone to Honolulu lately, they're gone. They now take the beach on where the people experiencing homeless or unhoused, I know people use different definitions or names, are on one side and tourists on the other side, and they get panhandled. LA is a mess, but LA does have some good pockets still in their city, but they also have some of the worst pockets there. Portland, when we went up to do our documentary, and you're the mayor, on the mayor's site in Portland, they said 2,600 encampments were officially counted by the mayor's office in Portland. That was what they had on their website. The advocates think the number was higher. So if you want to lose your city, just keep going on housing first and you're going to lose your city. If you want to do real recovery and stop it, you got to focus on treatment. And if you want to focus on the street level, it's untreated mental illness and substance abuse. That's all it is. I don't want to say it's that simple, but it really is. If you want to do single moms, clean and sober, that's housing first. That's a perfect group for housing first. That's the perfect group for it. If it's a domestic violence, let's go post-traumatic stress veteran. That's mental health and safety and security, and that's a different type of program. So we got to break these down and look at them. Most of the people want to talk about the 650. That's where most of the, and I'm a former mayor pro tem of San Antonio, so I get the politics of it. I've worked in 3 administrations, so I get there's politics involved. But at some point, you got to start using common sense here if we're going to try to solve this. And the 650, here's what we know about that 650,000 population. And I purposely use left of myself journals and resources. I never quote something that's to my right. So University of Berkeley and University of UCLA, California Policy Lab, they have a great think tank out there. So far, far left think tank. They took 64,000 people experiencing homeless, the largest study ever, and you should go look at it. I could get it to you. It came out, I think, in 2019. And they looked at all homeless, all types of homeless, and then it was the best study I've ever seen. They looked at all these numbers. Then they did sub-tabs, so, cross-tabbing so that you looked at it. And what they found on street-level homeless, which is where a lot of you work in space, almost all the media talks about, the politics are about, 3/4 had untreated mental illness in their records, in their clinical file, after looking at 64,000 people. Of that, roughly 3/4 had substance use. And substance use is really the self-medicating. I know some people on the far right sort of think this is a recreational use. It is not. This is self-medication. They can't afford recreational drugs. Let's remember the practicality. This is self-medicating, so they're really interconnected. Not a perfect overlap. There's some that's only substance use, some only mental health, but most it's together. So that's what they found in the clinical records. What was more shocking is the self-report of this. 50% said they directly lost homelessness because of untreated mental illness. 50% directly said they lost it to substance abuse. And obviously there's overlap. And we all know self-reports underestimate numbers. So if that is our real issue, why are we fiddling over, do we want a tiny home, or do we want an apartment, do we want a condo, do we want a suite, do we want a cottage? I don't care what the housing is. I really don't. Housing is part of the answer, important, but if you do housing without treatment, you're not going to get recovery. And so if there are only two things you're going to read, go read the Cal policy study, and I could get you the link in the medical indications. The second thing, if there's only one study, if you're going to read one other study, is from JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association, a left-to-center medical journal, really high quality. I mean, they have really good stuff, but they pick sort of lefty issues. And I'm purposely doing that because I want you to show I'm not picking the Heritage Foundation or the Discovery Institute. I'm not picking a right wing, I'm picking left. And JAMA was really intrigued by the death rate of homelessness that doubled right after COVID comes out. And I'm in charge. I'm that person. I'm on the COVID task force. I'm coordinating HHS and HUD, and I'm coordinating with the White House. And I kept saying, I don't think we're going to have the 50,000 projected homeless deaths that was projected. That was the minimal floor. A guy named Covain, who's generally been the top researcher in the space, he said it's going to be 50,000 or more. Could easily get to 100. What a lot of advocates said. The day I left the Biden administration, because Biden kept me around for a little bit, just a real little bit, we had less than 600 deaths because of COVID. And anybody who said it was that high didn't understand homelessness. Think about it. You're outdoors. What were we saying? Fresh air. Don't be near somebody. You were social distanced. You had circulation every 3 hours, or 3 circulations per hour. So when you go through it, being homelessness was not as risk factor it was. So why is it that since March 13th, homeless rates have doubled in death? March 13th, 2020, the official day we declare the emergency management. Why does the death rate double? The death rate doubled because of other things. And the JAMA people didn't believe me. I wrote several reports, and they basically said I was being a political person and this, that, and the other. And so they went and did a study, and I love them because they said, we're gonna go look at ground zero. We're gonna look at San Francisco. We're gonna look from the official declaration for 1 year. We're gonna look at every single death case. We're gonna go to the coroner's office and look at everything. And we're gonna do a deep dive on why it's causing the deaths. Because they all thought it was COVID. They thought it was making. And if you go read the abstract, there's this great line in the abstract that says, we found 0 deaths due to COVID. Not the increase. They didn't find any deaths in the base number. You know what they found? The most deaths were drug overdose in an apartment provided by COVID money to give them an individual room without treatment and recovery. So they were given a room with COVID money, or, you know all those different programs that came out. And so they got a room and they were in isolation. And they didn't get treatment before they went in. They didn't get treatment as they went in. And they had a doubling of the death rate. That's from JAMA, not Robert Marbut. You know, that's JAMA. So if we want to get serious about reducing street level homelessness, if you don't talk about treatment, if you don't talk about recovery, if you don't talk about untreated mental illness or substance abuse, you're missing the lane. It's amazing how many people call me up and say, we want you to come in and tell us what type of housing we'd have. And I literally write back, I don't care what your housing is, tell me what your services are. Tell me what your wraparound services are. Because if they're good, whether you're in a tiny home, an apartment, a condo, a complex, or congregate housing, you're there. By the way, congregate housing has much less deaths than individual rooms. Chew on that. Think about what that means. Also think about the number one way to exit street level homeless in America now is dying. That's the number one way in America to get out of homeless is to die now. So if we aren't going to get serious about untreated mental illness and substance abuse, we're really missing the ball. Now, that's not all the story, but that's the start of how we got going the wrong way. Here's the second part of the story. And I'm going to show my age. When I started working in homeless as a volunteer, I was worried about angel dust and PCP. So this guy's laughing. He knows I was in the 70s. So we go through that. Then we go into spice, K2, synthetic marijuana. We go through coke and crack. We go through back another round of K2 and spice. Then we get into the organic opioids, heroin, black tar, and we all thought, I remember when we thought PCP was horrible because we had all these stories about shootings back and forth and those go. And then each level got worse and worse. And when we got to black tar, heroin, we said, this is the worst thing we've ever seen in our life. It's natural. It is basically pure heroin out of the poppy. And that death rate connected in homeless and, by the way, outside of homelessness. This is not, drugs is not just a homelessness issue. And we said, that's horrible. That's the worst thing we got. And then mankind created the most dangerous drug ever, synthetic opioid. Fentanyl, for those of you who don't know, fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine. Not 50%, not 5%, not 50 percentage points or 500, 50 times to 100 times. So that's 10,000%, 5 to 10,000% more powerful. 2 grains of pure fentanyl that was salt grains will kill most every one of you in the room. 2 or 3 of us, it would take 3 grains. And that's it. That's what fentanyl does. So now on the street within homelessness, we have fentanyl, and we now have fentanyl tranq. If you're not familiar, it's with tranquilizers, with the horse tranquilizer combined with fentanyl. And because meth is basically an upper, and fentanyl is basically a downer, a lot of people sort of mix that up a little bit. They're both bad for different reasons. But as soon as you got to synthetics, we were able to make things so much more powerful. And this is for homeless world and non-homeless world. But within the homeless world, once you see fentanyl hit the homelessness world, it would go. I was told by some police officers today that the out-of-towners brought meth in, and then within months, everybody had meth. Even though you didn't have meth before, the out-of-towners brought it in and got people hooked up and such. And meth is bad. I used to think meth was the worst thing in the world. But now with fentanyl and tranq, and here's what's crazy about fentanyl and tranq, they're finding that the reversal agents, Narcan and all the reversals, the shots, the nose, whatever, when you have it get over about 20% tranq, somehow there's something with the tranquilizer that counters the Narcan, which is trying to counter the fentanyl, and it doesn't work for a lot of people. So you gotta hit them 3 or 4 times. The other thing is there's a myth that Narcan and the reversal agents or whatever, they have some different brand names and different ones for different things. There's this mystery, well, I don't think it's a mystery, I think it's a horrible myth, that it's not dangerous. There's no long-term, whatever. So here's what we know when you have a heart attack or stroke. If you talk to a neuroscientist or a neurosurgeon, they always say when you have a heart attack or stroke, you lose about 2 to 3% of your body brain when you have a heart attack. So you lose, that's what you lose, and you lose it. So you lose it. So if that's your only heart attack, your only stroke, you've lost 2 or 3%, that's not a bad, net total, you're alive, but you only lost 2 or 3% of your brain capacity. What we know is you're losing it because of your oxygen. When you're dying on the street, we did it in our movie, the documentary, we went into San Francisco, and the first 15 minutes we saw 3 people die, and our camera crews were not set up. It was just happening right in front of us. And they came in with Narcan, they brought 1 person back alive, 1 person died later, 1 person died there. And when you start looking at the amount of people who are getting reversing agents, many are up to 10 or 20 times now. So if you lose that amount of oxygen with your as a stroke because you're out on fentanyl, when you're in fentanyl, you're just out, and you go. So you're losing 60, 70% of your brain capacity if you're a multiple use of reversal. So this idea that that's not dangerous is a real myth. There's this myth that's like sugar candy. I'm seeing more and more people on the street who take fentanyl or meth, and they want the reversal agents, and they actually wear the reversal agent on their chest. It's like a strapped on with their button. So you go up and do it. San Francisco actually provides a, quote, safe consumption site, which I don't think is anything safe about it. They literally paid for by the health directorate of the city and county of San Francisco, and they have it set up right a block and a half from City Hall. You can't make this stuff up. It's a block and a half from the City Hall, it's a block from the FBI building, 2 blocks from DEA, and a half a block from the federal 9th Circuit that allowed them to do this crazy stuff. And it's right there in the center. They have medical mesh, they've set up a medical thing, and they have doctors in there, PAs, nurses. They provide you the straws, they provide you the pipes, they provide you the foil, they provide you everything but the active ingredient. And the active ingredient, when you look at that package, is really cheap compared to the other. So why do we have a double death rate in San Francisco? The health department's actually giving you this site to shoot up, or smoke up, or digest, or chew, depending on what way you're going. So this is a serious problem. I mean, this is really, really serious, and if we want to get serious about it, don't talk about tiny homes or little this or that. Talk to me about what your treatment plan is, what your protocols are to engage, how do you get people in? And if you do that, the housing will work. And you gotta have housing, you gotta have it together, not one or the other. You gotta have it at the same time, but you gotta have really good programs. So I'm gonna start bouncing around because I only got 15 minutes left. So I'm gonna bounce around to several things here that I was asked. Unfortunately, I was asked so many things, so now it's gonna be like lightning round, boom, boom, all right, new topic, boom, boom. Safe places. I was asked to do a talk last year, and it was, are safe places good or bad? And I said, tell me more. It depends. The answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no, sometimes maybe. So first off, what is a safe site? So I'm going to be going through my speaking points. Inclement weather is a safe site. A hotel and motel rental, short-term rental, a courtyard and encampment zones, if you've been reading about Phoenix zones, that's where that comes from. Or these safe consumption sites like they're doing in Portland, California, Philadelphia has one, Seattle, San Francisco is a big one. So those are safe consumption sites. So why do we have these safe places? One, Housing first did not end homelessness. I mean, really, if it ended it, you wouldn't need these. Second, we have a lack of mental health and substance use treatment beds. Next is the local system's overwhelmed, so we've got to find a place. And then I go into what are the reasons not to have a safe site? You know, because some people, and the answer really does depend, you know, what it's being used for. If you're doing it as a bad political answer to a clinical treatment problem, you shouldn't be doing it. If you are, because you got to get something done by next Wednesday, don't do it. Well, literally, I got asked by one mayor, said, I need something up by next Wednesday. Are you doing it to promote harm reduction? Is it enabling versus engaging? Is it enabling? Is it keeping you there, or is the idea to get you out of homeless? And then, and by the way, will it hurt the local community wherever you put it? So that's there. Reasons to have it, because there's sometimes good reasons. Saving lives during emergencies. And that could be a weather emergency, tornado emergency, hurricane emergency. One city I was in recently, they had a 4-day power outage, and that really clobbered the homeless services community, so that would be one. Do you have a safe place that adds value added to the community? Is the new safe place a creation of a front door that gets people into treatment? Sometimes it is, so that's good to do it. So the answer is, after you answer those questions, what is your metrics between saving short-term lives versus long-term lives? Because weather is a short-term deal, and if it's a short-term facility because of a short-term weather problem, that makes sense. But if you make a short-term program a long-term program, it becomes enabling and fostering your current position in life not to engage out of homelessness, probably not a good idea. So if you're ever asked to be involved with one of those, know exactly what's being developed, know exactly what your role is, negotiate to get key concessions, make sure you have treatment built in, go the shortest term possible, avoid mission creep, and avoid enablement and pursue engagement. So if you're going to set one of them, there's ways to do that, but I got asked to do that. Next one, quick, I'm just going to be clicking through these. Affordable housing. Is your affordable housing for the community of Alice? Or, you know, for your older time people, not, you know, in the new acronyms, you know, we used to call that working poor, now it's Alice. Is it for them, or is affordable housing for people experiencing homelessness the unhoused? Because they're totally different. If you're working for the at-risk mom we talked about, affordable housing is critical, absolute critical, and you need it. But if you're trying to apply affordable housing to homelessness, it doesn't make any sense in the world. Almost everybody experiencing homeless had a house once. Almost everyone, if you test it, almost everybody had a house already. They lost the house because they couldn't pay the bills, because they couldn't go to work. They couldn't go to work because they were on substance use. Why were they on substance use? Because of mental health. And they burned through all their other bridges. So they're just going to lose the house a second time. I mean, think about how good you take care of your car when you own it or you're paying for it versus taking care of your car when it's rental. Well, when the government subsidizes your second house, what we have found is you don't take care of the house as good as you took care of it in the first place. And by the way, people are cycling through. I've heard multiple people in the last 2 days say, we're getting people housed, but they're leaving in 3 or 4 weeks. And it's because you didn't start with treatment. You have to start with treatment, and when they're there, go with treatment. If somebody's been on the street 10 years, treatment's not 14 days. It's not 28 days. It may not be 8 months. I sort of have a rule of thumb, 1 year to 1 month. That seems to be about what I've found. And you got to be serious about it and say, oh, we can't afford it. I would argue you can't afford not to do it. I think things are going to get much worse if we don't do it. Right now, you have a manageable problem here, but I am surprised about how big your numbers are. 3 or 4 people talked to me ahead of time, and I said, how do you have that big of numbers for this small of a community? I'm very surprised there, but it's still manageable. I think you also don't know how many people are coming in from out of town. And one thing I think you should think about considering is having residential requirements for service levels. What we know in the mental health business is the best place for you to get recovery is where you're from, not in an unknown place with no family, no friends, no understanding. So unless it's domestic violence, and domestic violence is a totally different thing. If you send a domestic violence victim or survivor back home to the knucklehead, they may die. Do not do that. This is for everybody else. Everybody else, and even SAMHSA, the Federal Mental Health Authority of the federal government, says the best place to get recovery is wherever home is. So we need to get you back to home. And that's not being mean. That's saying we're gonna put you in the best chance of place for you to have recovery. And by the way, you won't take a slot. I was told by one person experiencing homeless this morning, and other people were referring to another question that they got, is your in-town people, your homegrown people are complaining about the out-of-town people because they're taking their services away and thinning it out, and they can't get the number to get into Catholic Charities at night. And so I think you gotta understand there's a service, and you're not being mean. You might do a 3-day bag of food for an out-of-towner, and you do a 30-day supply for mom and 3 kids who's clean and sober. I think we gotta distinguish. You don't go to the hospital and give you the same level of treatment or the same type of treatment. They customize the treatment. They even customize the level of the medication. Yet we're treating everybody the same way. That doesn't make sense. We can talk about that more, but if you do that right, that's how you stem the Kevin Costner problem. Build it, they'll come. And it really does address that issue. So just in case, if some of you thinking that something I'm saying is logical, but you're having a hard time hanging out with the Trump person philosophically, I get that. Go watch President Biden's town hall with Don Lemon. That was last year, right before Don Lemon got fired. And in that, he was asked about treatment, he was asked about substance abuse and mental health. And you'll see a 3-minute little thing he does. He says, we must have mandatory treatment for everybody who leaves jail and prison. He went to my right. I mean, he went from my far left to over on that side. I mean, he did. Governor Brown, by the way, who signed the Housing First bill in California, and for those of you who are not familiar, the federal government gave all money to Housing First. Then California said they would do all. It was signed by Governor Brown. After he signed it, not only did homeless continue to go up the way it went up 47% in the next, I think, 4 years, after California did it. And he, who signed the bill, did a great 30-minute special on KCET where he politely said, my thoughts have evolved a little bit, and I think we need to have mandatory treatment. This is Governor Brown, Governor Mubin, for those of you who remember. Mayor of San Francisco, just right before Christmas, if you didn't miss it. She wants mandatory substance use testing and treatment before you're placed into housing. This is the mayor of San Francisco. Now, I get it, she's running for election, and election's in the next 30 days, so I get that issue. But these are people who said I was crazy 12 years ago and are now adopting these policies. So I think it's more of an issue you wanna sort of think about it, but people are starting to come around, and part of it is Housing First did not end homeless last year, if you didn't notice. And it didn't end it before the pandemic for chronic veterans or families. So we need to rethink how we do this. Now, since we only have 5 minutes left, I'm gonna go to some quick observations I had just driving around about you all. And I may be off on these. I've only been on the ground 24 hours, so if I'm off, apologize. Normally when I do this, I get about 85% right, and about 15, I really, really blow it. So if I blow it, I'm sorry. Don't treat the others as bad. you all really like working together. Everybody I went to said, I like so-and-so, or over at that agency, I'd ask what other agencies you work with. Oh, over there, so-and-so's good, Lisa's good, you know, whatever. And even police department's good. I mean, I heard that several times. That's not, most of the time, we talked about this morning, I go to a police department, or go to a city, and they go, God, the police department's awful. You know, that's what you hear almost everywhere now. Also, you hear, when you hear agencies complaining, normally they complain about each other in cities. The fact that you say something nice about each other, that's a good start, because if you don't like each other, you're not going to work well together. So the good news is you really do like each other. A lot of you have each other on speed dial. We went around to several tours and then ran into people and, you know, over there and, you know, there. So don't underestimate that value, because most communities, that's not the way it is. So appreciate that. You have a growing female problem that I'm worried about. Your female numbers are going up, which are also matching national numbers. Nationally, females are almost at 41%. When I started Haven for Hope, the number was closer to 10%. So you need volume and you need customized treatment. What the guys need, the women need, are very different. You must separate males, females, and families. You have too much commingling now. I know you're starting to undo that. If you're not familiar with the ACEs study from the, you know, toxic exposure and stress, if you haven't seen that, we don't have time to go into it, but read that. And as soon as you read that, you'll say, no child should ever see an adult male, adult female in any recovery system, period. They should not be in the same place. They shouldn't be in the same restaurant. They shouldn't be in the same cafeteria. They shouldn't be in the same hallway, same bathroom. You gotta get them separated. And adult women are equally as toxic as adult men. And I know that's hard to say, but that's what's going. And if you wanna really help women, you have to break the sex for safety street cycle, negative, where one uses sex, the other uses security to get each other, or the sex for drugs cycle on the street. If you really want to help women, you got to break that up. And the only way to break that up, especially now that you're getting bigger numbers, you need to separate. So adult males, adult females, and families need to be in different places. I mean, really different, like 3 miles away. It's different. They can't be down the street. They can't be joint operating at all. CPC, did I get that right, sir?
Yes.
Okay, love CPC. Unbelievable. That's your beachhead. You know, that's good. And what the new building with what the rescue mission is doing, and if we figure out how to separate the men and women, it's Catholic Charities. Those 3 are strategic pieces. The new building that Street Bridge is doing, and with there, I think you got a great thing. And at first I was thinking they needed to be in the same place, but because so many people are helped that are not experiencing homeless, it probably makes sense to have a service center here. Everything about services here, everything about housing somewhere else. Now, if you do a decentralized system like Pinellas County did, which by the way has had an 85% reduction average in their county for 11 years, 12 years, if you spread things out, which is the model you've adopted, I don't know if it was strategic or you stumbled into it, but that's what you have. You know, with what you're building is fabulous. With what what you got with CPC is fabulous. Those are your anchors. Now we got to figure out, and then if families and children go with Salvation Army, now we got that piece. Now you see how the piece of where you're actually doing it. But when you do decentralized things as compared to centralized campus, you got to do 2 things. You got to put a lot of money into transportation. You can't depend on the transportation system. You have to have your own system. You have to have point-to-point service delivered. You might have it might be a simple van that's on a loop that's doing it. You can't depend on the bus system. And second, you have to have a robust data system. Period. That integrates where all the service providers are. You need a first name, last name list of every person experiencing homelessness here, where you got everybody. And I asked everybody, what's your first name, last name list? And several people glazed eyes at me. Several people said, I have it, but only the people who get X service or that. It needs to be a community-wide, singular list, first name, last name, and shows everything they're hitting so that you understand what's going on in that person. And it should be managed by master case managers. You need to bring back your hot team. I know you sort of focused on a hot team. Homeless outreach team is the national thing, whether you call it HEART or whatever, or HET, there's a new word being used now, homeless engagement team. We know with metaphysical certainty, if you put a police officer with a social worker together, it works. Pinellas County, who's had the largest county reduction other than San Antonio, they put 5 homeless outreach teams, all 5 with different officers from different, one of the 22 cities in the county, and 5 social workers. And they divide the county up and said, anything is called by address, not by agency. And they did sort of like you do drug task force coordination and such. So you need to have that team. If that's the best expense you could ever spend on initially. And you gotta do that. You gotta improve some transitional housing. You don't really have a lot of transitional housing. You have a real gap of that. And when Bridge Street Mission, when they open up, and when Salvation Army opens their family, we need to figure out where women go. Because they can't be an overflow somewhere else. If they go, they need to be cleanly separated. Maybe it's a different door. And I get ideal is not always reality, but you got to do your best to figure out how to separate there. Transformation versus engagement, or enablement versus engagement. I saw a couple things today that it had nothing to do with getting people out of homelessness. It was all about keeping you in homelessness. If you give out a sleeping bag and food, and if we just say, I want to make it easy for you to stay on the river, that is doing nothing but prolonging death in place. That's sort of hospicing in place without the hospice part. You want your brain and heart working together, and you want to be able to engage people where you transform people to get out of homelessness. If you want to reduce your number, you got to get some people to leave homelessness and not die. I mean, I was sad. I was looking at some lists today, and it's deceased. It's not independent, found home, often, it's deceased. That's how you're exiting homelessness here. So we need to go from an enablement mentality. I'm going to enable you, stay right there. I'm going to feed you. I'm going to give money out the window. I'm going to give you sleeping bags and cots and all that. It needs to be, how do we get you out of homeless? What's your story? What's your story? What's your story? And go through and customize that based off their cohort and based off of their situation. And there's a big sort of an enablement culture here as compared to an engagement culture to get out of homeless. Transformational services, that's another term used often. I use, do you graduate out of homeless? The 4th measurement of the first federal law that was created on Ronald Reagan said, how many people get to self-independency? That you don't need a government subsidy, whatever. That's still on the record. And by the way, advocates never talk about the 4th. They only read the first 3. So if any of you want to see it, I have it on my phone. I'll give it to you. And you can see that to me is our ultimate. How many people do you get out of homeless who never come back? And if they come back, they're coming back to help and give back. That's when you know you got a system. Because right now, this system is how do we keep you alive? And I don't think keeping you alive is dignity and respect. I think it should be thrive and exit. That's just my thinking. And then I'm going to leave with 2 things, and we'll be right on the button here. Homeless to me is a clinical issue. It's not a civil rights issue. It's not a civil liberties issue. It's not an advocacy issue. Those are all important. But if it's a clinical issue and you're having a heart attack in the ER Do you want to be running into the nurses and saying, well, let me talk to you about Pottinger versus Boise, and what did you do with the sleeping bag while the police officer called the EMS and they transported you? We need to focus on what counts, and this sort of new emergence of civil liberty, harm reduction, and all that is to me just mind-boggling. And when I found out about the JAMA article, the doubling of the death rates in California, because using COVID money to give you individual room and you overdose in, I called up and it was an off-the-record conversation, so I use Chatham House rules a lot. So I'm going to respect, I won't name this person, but it's somebody you've seen on TV. If you're in the homeless world, you've seen on TV. You've probably seen some stuff they've written, and I guarantee you know their name. And I called them up, said, have you heard about the doubling of death rate? And he knows a lot in California, and he goes, no, and he didn't believe it had doubled. And I said, it's not doubling because of COVID. Have you seen the JAMA article? No. Send him the JAMA article. Reads it. Calls me back an hour. All right, I read it. Said, what do you think? Said, at least they're dying in dignity and respect. I just don't think that's a success. But he's the civil rights guy, because at least they're in their own room while they die. I'm like, we need to rethink that whole system, and that's a whole nother thing. Now, last thing, and I'll just end it, then we got plenty of time for Q&A, and we'll just go around. To sum up my political philosophy, my policy, whether it's for local government, whether it's for national government, whether it's for your mission or Salvation Army, we met with them earlier, Catholic Charities, is I think it's this simple. Right now in our country, we're making it so easy to get high and so hard to get treatment. Instead, we need to make it easy to get treatment and hard to get high. It really is down to that. And if we can do that at an agency level, as you build out your new place, if Catholic Charities moves or doesn't move, if, families go here, and you got to put the playing pieces in the right places. We got to do that, because if you don't do that, you're not there. If you don't have good management, good design, you're not going to have good outcomes. And we want to have outcomes based on data, not hunches or analytics there. But if we can get all the playing pieces put in the right place, and then change our focus to making it hard to get high and easy to get treatment, you're going to change the game. You really will change the game. But if you say, let's keep going the way we're going, right now your problem is solvable. They're addressable. You won't end it, but you can dramatically reduce it, you can keep it from growing, and you can keep it manageable. But here's what I know with metaphysical certainty. If you don't make some fundamental changes, your homeless population will probably double in 5 years. That's based off national numbers. Maybe yours is a little faster. There's some reasons why I think you might be a little faster than national average. There's some things I think you might be longer. Unless I was here longer, it's hard to determine. But let's go with 5. So you double in 5. Was it cheaper now, or is it cheaper when you're double? Is it cheaper now when you have less chronic people than getting 5 more years added on everybody of chronicness? That, again, if my 1 year to 1 month that means you've added, for every person you don't treat now, you've added 5 months of treatment on top of everything else they should have gotten in the first place. So this is the cheapest it will ever be to solve this. And I don't think it's about being cheap. I think it's about investment. If we don't invest in making these changes, you're not going to get there, and it's just going to go. So, can I just go right into Q&A?
Yeah.
You okay?
Yeah.
All right.
I have a question.
Go.
What have you seen, what do you advise about recruiting mental health providers? So you've hit mental health as a foundational issue, and the medical community has certainly dropped the ball, and I'm 33 years as a behavioral pediatrician recovering from that, and apologizing to everyone how the medical community has totally, and the insurance industry and everything else has just dropped it on mental health care. So what have you seen work for the recruitment of mental health providers in models that, in your model and models that work? How do we get them?
Yeah. let me back up a half a step, then I'll jump into it. Because I think you gotta know why we got there to go. In 1950s, in the United States, we had roughly, these are gonna be very ballpark numbers, if any of you want, there's a guy named Ide who wrote a great book, and he tells you it's like 932,000.23, and it averaged at midnight. You know, he has a great book out there if you wanna get that detail. But here's the ballpark numbers. 1950, we had 500,000 federally funded mental health beds, ballpark. Right now, we have about 25,000, and they're all forensic based for the most part. There's no open-ended. We have a thing called the IMD exclusion, which is the wonkiest thing you'll ever hit, but we gotta start talking about it. In simple terms, it says, if you're under 18, we can pay for mental health. If you're over 65, we can pay for mental health, but only will pay for it if you're in a facility less than 16 people. That's what the IMD exclusion says, and you can go look it up and such. So until we get serious about how you fund this, we don't even get to your part of recruitment. That's why we gotta fix this up. And I'm gonna throw a little on both sides here. Ronald Reagan was president in 1980, and I think at that time, there were about 350,000 beds, maybe 300,000. It was less than 500, but it wasn't 25. And he and a guy named Dick Darman, who was head of the budget side of the White House, thought that the federal government should not be in the mental health business. And in fairness, when he was governor, he also did the same. And so he thought the federal government should wipe out all that funding and they should just stop spending any money. That's not the role of the federal government. So it defunded a system. So that's the right side. Now, the lefties, I know some of you are in the lefties, you were watching One That Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and thought it was a documentary. And you realized that that place that it was about in New York was horrible. It was horrible. I've been to that. It's still open, but not open, but you can go there because nobody wants to tear it down. It's really a creepy place. I mean, you get the creeps going into this place, and that's without Nurse Ratched. And so when you go in and see this, that place needed to be closed, but not the entire system of America. We needed to reform our system, not close the system. And so you had this strange alliance on the far right that said we don't want to fund this, and on the far left we want to deinstitutionalize. So we just wiped out our system. And right now, if you're under 18 and over 65, you can get reimbursement if you're in a facility under 15. Now, if you have any hospital administrators in here, I say, if you're going to design a system of anything, orthopedics, cosmetic surgery, mental health, are you going to design it for 15 people? Probably the most expensive pinch point there is. It's cheaper to fund one person because you pick them up and we all move together. You know, the case manager, the PA, the doc, and we go fly you somewhere. But 15 people is an impossible number. It doesn't make sense. So we never get to your question until we fix these.
Okay.
Now, how do you recruit? Because we recruited a lot of clinical people in San Antonio. You pay them a lot of money. You pay them a lot of money. And I give them a lot of PTO. PTO, you need to give extra time with mental health people because if they don't get their own time, they're not healthy themselves, they won't be healthy to help others. So PTO, they need to be able to call, I need a break. And I'm oversimplifying PTO. But you have to pay for good people, and it's an investment, it's not a cost. And then you gotta really give them the time off. And if you start hiring people and say, in any 14-day period, this is what I did when I was hiring for Haven for case manager, any 14-day period, I need you to work 10 days. You can go 4, 1 off, 3, 1 off. You wanna take one long 4-day to decompress. Everybody decompresses differently, so I just need you signed up for 10 days out of 14. You figure out when you take your 4 days off. Plus, we give you built up time and extra. That's how you really recruit. If you go in and say you gotta be here 9 to 5, you can't leave the building, you get a 42-minute break for lunch, you might get a coffee break 2 times a day, and we're gonna pay you below the minimum wage, that's not how you recruit. So you have to spend money, but you also have to treat these individuals with respect, and good case managers, good mental health workers are gold, they're platinum.
So the obvious follow-up question is, where'd you find the money? Open to suggestions.
Everywhere. I mean, to build Haven for Hope in 2005 dollars was 125 million just to pay for the building. And our operating budget's about 30 million-ish. You know, and that depends on how you count the other agencies and such. And, you know, when you lump them all in. But we, as a community, said we did not want to become Portland or San Francisco, and we were on our way. And when we started, Austin had less than we had more. We had the same demographic as Austin, they're right up the street. And our number is, we're in year 14 of an 85% reduction off the baseline. And Austin is double or triple, depending on which category you're talking about. And we did it one way, and they did the 2013 model.
So massive fundraising?
Oh yeah, we fundraise, yeah. I can't go in a restaurant, this is why I travel, I can't go to San Antonio and get a restaurant. I walk in, people would scurry away. You know, but
So it's not government, you don't get any government money?
you need to get government money.
Okay.
You need to get private sector money, you need foundation money, you need church money, you need kids' penny money. You need everybody to do it. Now, here's a couple things. It's very easy for a nonprofit to raise money for kids and vets. That's very easy. But nobody wants to help a chronic male 45 years on the street. It just doesn't happen. And that's where government has to step in, and whether it's federal, state, or local, or county, or a hybrid, has to step in on the adult males, adult females, because you will not find funding for that group. It's just not there. And if you don't invest now, it's gonna get worse later. So you need money from it. This problem is way too big now in almost every community to be solved by one sector. The faith community needs to be there, the business community needs to be there, the government community needs to be there, and the agencies need to be there. And agencies have to be okay of saying, if we have a residency requirement, we're treating people differently because we're customizing the best treatment for them. We're not being mean, but we're not gonna adopt an out-of-towner and give them the welcome wagon. We shouldn't be doing that. That's counterproductive. And I know that sounds harsh at first, but then you don't have time, ability, and resources, time, talent, and treasure to help your other people. Go.
Hi, Ken Tolbert from St. Vincent de Paul. A year or so ago, we had a conference call with a consulting group that was associated with Haven for Hope. I can't remember, I should have brought the information. But our understanding was that there was a group that came out of your work. The movie I think I saw was Beyond Homeless, is that?
No, that was another documentary. Ours is No Address, and
That's the
Americans
new one.
with No Address.
There's another one going
Yeah.
around, but it references Haven for Hope is part of it, I believe. And we got a hold of the consultant that said they came out of your organization, and the thing they talked about was they were offering a internet or a web-based solution in a community, because in San Antonio, you guys brought so much money in from different people, and it was a way to get everybody involved and on a common website. Are you involved with that?
Yeah, I was the founding president, so
Yeah.
I was there for 5 years. If it's Sean Lee, I'm familiar with, he's a great guy, and he was our guy who developed our sold software package, so it may be him. If it's not Sean Lee, I'd be very careful who you're talking to, so find out.
We're working on San Francisco now.
Doesn't sound familiar at all, so let's find the name and then we'll go offline.
Okay.
But I was the president, and Sean
Yeah.
Lee was our director of transformational services, so, okay. Yes, sir.
I just had a question. How do you think you should handle homeless teens that don't have substance abuse? Like, we had a home here called Cats Keeping Area Teens Safe that closed about a year ago after 2 years because it wasn't funded. And a lot of those kids were kids that mom and dad went to prison, or grandma passed away, or they were just out there, and they really had nobody else to help them. So that went away, and the house is about a mile from here. So my son did an Eagle Scout project, so I got kind of involved with them over a couple year, 2-year period of time. But all those kids just kind of disappeared because what I heard was that Wausau doesn't have a problem. And from what I'm hearing from you coming in, it's like you're kind of shocked because we do have a big problem here.
You have a problem.
Right, and I travel and I see San Antonio, and I say, wow, you guys do a great job of keeping it off the Riverwalk.
Yeah.
So
And we're not perfect by any means, you know, but an 85%, if you went back in time and go back to 2010 to the business community or the faith community or the service community and said, we're gonna design a program that gives you an 85% reduction and lasts over a decade, they would say, I was on crack.
right.
And so my question to you is, how many are fostering out?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. You're talking about you can pay me now or you can pay me later.
Yeah.
So the people that ran this home wanted to develop these kids, help them get educated so that they don't get into like a survival mode within a couple of years. And now they just kind of all disappeared because
They haven't
there's
disappeared.
Well, no, but they're not funded through
I
the house.
guarantee you they're in your community.
Right,
and
right.
I will bet you can find them.
Right. Well,
I'm serious.
yeah.
I bet you do a few little searches, you're gonna find them on your list.
right. So they were pretty much shoved out, and they were you know, they had their regiment where they had to pass their tests and they had to get tested, you know, and suddenly there was just no money. But it seems like everything we're talking about is mental health or substance abuse. But then you have this group of kids that possibly could be rehabilitated, but nobody's there to help them.
In the 75% untreated mental illness substances, those two groups on the street, what you're talking about is over on Department of Education, and it could be a couch surfer, it could be into, there are two categories they're probably coming out of. The big thing on that is knowing how many are fostering out and how many are other, because the people have been in the foster system. We met a guy, literally our dinner server last night, who's from here. He had a bad situation with family at 13, goes to foster home, that doesn't work out. Then he goes to group foster home, then he goes to another foster home, and that didn't really work out. And then now he's on his own, but he's doing real well. But that's the unusual case. That's the exception. And he really had his act together. We started to give him case management. He was giving us case management. I mean, you know. But you need to separate the foster and the non-foster. So you need two programs there. And then you got to fund it. And if you don't fund it, I guarantee you, he'll get them in 5 years.
Well, and that was the
or
problem.
less.
That was the problem. In fact, there was an example that $15,000 was given for a model airplane concrete runway instead of a single dollar to this, you know, keeping area teens safe. So it's one of those things that just kind of stuck with me, and now that you're here, I thought,
And by the way, I don't want to, I'm trying not to get political, I'm just trying to get it, to show you this, this is crime, homelessness, you know, the advent of fentanyl, some of these other things going on. If you look at, I would say 80% of the most recent 6 or 7 years of active shooters are in that bucket. I don't know that. I have, at one time I did a lot of research in that area, but I haven't, my research is old, so if I'm giving you a data point and it turns out wrong, I'm sorry. But if it was what it used to be and what I've been reading, that group you're talking about is who is becoming, I know that's Virginia Tech, I know that's you know, the School by the Glades, Marion, I mean, I'm just going, Uvalde, those are all in that, you're describing that bucket. So if you don't do it because of homelessness, if you don't do it because of the right reason, you might want to be doing it because this other thing. Yeah. Yes?
My name is Megan Newman. I'm the Deputy Director for the Transit Department for the City of Wausau. Is something, you said something interesting, that organizations should come together to find transportation because public transportation isn't the answer. And I'm wondering what you see in other communities that are happening to create that despair, and maybe what we could do to be better.
Okay, great question. And we spent a lot of time up in, of all weird places, Pasadena, California, dealing this. And so we did just on that one question, we did a 2-day charrette. So we brought in all the different maps for the transportation. And we had all the head pastors, head rabbis, head Catholic priests, some really high-end business people. And we said, you're going from here to here, here's your map. Do you know how many of the pastors, priests, rabbis, and business people got there? And this wasn't a table talk. We literally sent them there. We put them on the bus and said, we're right here at this bus stop, find out how to get there. And we put them on. Nobody got there. And they missed their lunch because we told them if you don't get back by noon, you're not going to get lunch. And if you don't get by 6, you're not going to get a bed tonight. See what happens? It triggers out. And you may be in an easier system, but what we have found, if you're in your first 4 or 5 months of treatment, negotiating public transportation almost never works. I'm just being honest. Maybe you may have the best, greatest thing, so I apologize. And you may, but what we find is the more you do that, the more disconnects you have. And when you go to you've gone to a decentralized regional system by default, maybe that was just how it evolved, but it's too late for you to come back and do a mega main campus. You can't do that. But you could build off yours. You can build off yours, and you can build off so you can do better moving the pieces. But still, in that first 4 or 5 months of treatment and recovery, you don't want person to miss their mental health appointment. Right now, you don't have mental health at your place, correct?
It's not at our place, but we're bringing it to us.
Yeah, so you don't have dental at your place right now.
Right.
And so those are 2 really important ones to have. So if you're giving a referral, the last thing you need is somebody who has severe mental illness not getting to their treatment, and they don't have the faculty capability to go. So you have to have point-to-point service for that first 4 or 5 months. After that, there's value to learn how to make the system work, but you don't do it by giving a map, you do it by putting a navigator with them. So you come volunteer with us, she and I are going to dental, and we've never been there before, and you're our navigator, and you help us out a couple times. That's how you have to do it to make it work. Because if they miss the appointment, that's a problem. John Hopkins, if you're not familiar, John Hopkins, who's a pretty secular organization, dropped it was called Bayview Mental Health, Behavioral Health, and Substance Use Clinic. I don't think that's their full phone. I think it's just John Hopkins Bayview. They put it inside the rescue mission. This John Hopkins University, pretty secular group, put it inside the faith-based rescue mission, and they found that before they put it in and coordinated a badge check-in system through an ID swipe deal, if I remember correctly, they were only getting about 40% making it to the clinic, 35 to 40%. So it was a little over 1 in 3 appointments. So that means you're missing 2/3 of your appointments of the most important appointment you can make, and you're in the same building. So when they put it inside and they gave them the cards and had a navigator for a week to get you going, they now have the highest clinic attendance of any John Hopkins clinic there is. And it's inside a homeless facility. And it's because they developed the swipe system, and they developed used like a person sort of was your elder brother, elder sister, help you out the first couple of days, and you learn how to get there. That's how we need to do everything we can to make it easy for that first 5 months of treatment. So back to, let's make it easy to get treatment, hard to get high.
Yeah.
Let's make it easy to get to treatment, hard to find out you missed the bus and some guy's selling crack at that corner. That's what happens. Somebody else had a hand in here, I thought. Somebody. Oh,
I've
there you go.
I don't know, mine's kind of all jumbled, and I might defer to you a little bit, but I worked at North Central Healthcare, our crisis department at one point, so I worked with a lot of people that came in with mental health issues, and I saw repeat people coming in there. They'd get treatment, they'd get better, and then they'd fall, and then they'd get treatment, they'd get better, and they'd fall. there wasn't places to send them for treatment. All of these people that got homeless didn't have jobs, so they were on Medicaid. No facility accepted Medicaid. They would accept you to what's the word I'm looking for? To just sober up, but not the actual treatment part of it. And then the whole residency issue too, with North Central Healthcare, it was always, if they presented and they were homeless, they were considered Wausau residents. So like, how do you, if you're homeless, how do you say, like, are you from here?
Okay.
So I have a whole bunch of
Okay,
stuff.
see, let's unpack this. How do you find out local? So I always ask, did you go to high school here?
Yes.
Were you born here? Parents living or dead here? And do you have a utility bill over 2 years old? All of those are in public domain. You can go online. I could probably, you give me your name, and it might take me a little time to find those sites, but once I find them, I can go and click in and find. And you can make that really strict or close. You might say, we want to be more generous, so we'll do a utility bill within a year. If you want to make it a little less generous, you might put the utility bill out at 4 years. See how you can do that. So that's the easiest one to do. And it's incredible because all of that's public domain, so even if they're fibbing to you, you find out right away. Now, the other problem you say happens all across America, and here's why. Almost every program in America is 28 days, except for the 14-day programs. And and I don't have any research on this, this is just a person who's met thousands of people on the street. I've lived 6 months in encampments in my life, in cities everywhere I go. So I may not, this may purely anecdote, it may be off, but it feels like for every year of on the street homelessness, you need 1 month of recovery. And so I know of no place that offers more than 28 days, even if you qualify for all those things you said. So it doesn't matter, because of course they'll get clean and they get out. Here's another little zinger fact. Who's the #1 provider of mental health services in America? Jails and prisons. Everybody comes out clean and sober, for the most part. I mean, they might get a little high here on a little low end and there. And within 72 hours, almost everybody in every study you do, they're right back to the drugs. And so if you don't have a true continuum of care, not a HUD continuum of care, I mean a real continuum of care, where when you come out, you go into a transformational facility that has treatment and recovery, not here's a house and a voucher and you go into self. That's where the people are overdosing. And by the way, you brought up this morning, I loved it. This one I realized we're like, she said, when you leave jail and prison after being clean and sober, you're used to taking maybe 2.cc's or something like that. You're clean and sober, 2.cc's or something, whatever your mix is gonna kill you. And so they don't know to back it down, and yet they're there in an apartment all by themselves. And then you don't even wanna be thinking about what you wanna do is at Haven for Hope, the back door to the jail is the front door to our courtyard. It's literally from here to that. Okay, I was exaggerating. From here to there. That's how far it is. You come right in. We will take anybody from jail and prison at any time of night. We don't have oh, you didn't get here by 6:30, you didn't fill out your form 38.2465. We just bring you in. And so if you don't have a plan for when they get out of jail or prison or get out of a 28-day, and if all you can find is a 28-day program, that's better than nothing. But if you don't have very rich, deep, robust services, they're going right back at it.
Right. What about the whole forced treatment, like you said, and then the fact
I was
that
hoping nobody would ask that. Because normally, because one day they're going to say, well, what do you think about Biden's, required? I'm really challenged by this issue. There's so much research that says judicial ordered treatment doesn't really work. There's a lot of it there, or it doesn't work as well as you hope it would be. But I keep meeting anecdotal people all the time who the judge forced me in, and it worked. The head of Tose Academy in Salt Lake City. If you want to see a rock star place, Tose Academy, the average amount of incarcerations is 27. That's how many times they've been served time, 27 times. That's their average. Everybody there is tatted top to bottom. And you go in there and they're like, hello, sir, how can I do? Tonight we're having, they have the best food of any homeless facility. I will go hang out, live there, any place I go. And it's outside of Salt Lake City. Incredible, you can look them up, the Other Side Academy. And their program is a 2-year program. 2-year program. And if you call Ride the Bench, the way you get in is you sit on a bench. And when they have 2 slots open, they start interviewing until they get the first 2 people. And the guy who interviews them is a guy who's been in jail. I think he served 13 years in jail himself. So he's not gonna hear somebody say, you don't know what I'm going through. And he's tatted and everything. And he says, if you're coming in, this is a 2-year commitment, you gotta commit to it and you'll do it. And you're on a job site within 72 hours. Now the job site might be an easy job site, but they also have heart. I mean, they have a moving company, a paint company, I don't know, they got all this other stuff going. But their idea is you gotta be in treatment for 2 years. Then you have post-treatment after 2 years. See the difference between 28 days or 14 days? I mean,
It's a lifelong thing.
yeah, if you're committing, I mean, how many of us have family members who are in AA? And they say, every day is a struggle. I'm celebrating 9 months, 9 days, and it's incredible. 9 months, 9 days, 23 hours, 2 minutes. I mean, they know that. And people experiencing homeless, alcohol, you know, when you and I got started in this, alcohol was our biggest problem. Now it's fentanyl, things that are just off the charts of powerfulness. So, so you gotta have a commitment to that. Okay, yes, ma'am.
You mentioned something about civil rights and that earlier about what their right is, and so we work for the Parks Department. And we work with our city attorney and our county attorney very closely because we work for both entities. And you know, all of our protocol right now, if we have an encampment in the parks, is to give them notice. We work with the PD and Tracy. You give them 14-day notice. You go back after 12 to make sure, see if they're gone. If not, they get 3 more days. And then we go in and we take everything. We have to keep it for 30 days. All of our stuff is based off of our case. All of our attorneys' stuff is based off of case law from the 9th District, California, because that's what she's finding. So, what can we do better than that? I mean, I've heard that we can. Because if we're just giving them notice and they have 14 more days to live in the park and not get that treatment that you're talking about, and stuff can happen, all this stuff. Plus, it's devaluing our community, you know, and the things we're finding. What can we do that we're not? I mean, our attorneys are afraid to get sued because of what's happening in California. So, what's your
Okay, we're gonna go to law school for 60 seconds. That's all. I'll limit it. I promise you, we'll limit it to 60 seconds. Pottinger versus Miami was the controlling law in homelessness for not decade and a half. And then literally within 30 days of each other, the Atlanta circuit said, Miami has solved their issues, so we're dismissing the case. Advocates did not want it dismissed. 1 month later, the 9th Circuit Court, led by Ted Olson, and I was one of his lead, I was supposed to be his lead sort of subject matter expert. He was taking the case to the Supreme Court, and we didn't even get 4 signatures in the Supreme Court to hear the case. Didn't even get 4. So what happened was the 9th Circuit, which is that San Francisco, by the way, is that circuit that it was okay to have that drug thing funded by the Health and Human Services. That's literally that court. They were like there. And they came up with Martin versus Boise case, which everybody follows. Now, so that's sort of Martin versus Boise, you can hear it. Here's the wild thing. In April, they're finally hearing the case. The Supreme Court's hearing it. This is their first homeless case they've heard in forever. And I'm not as optimistic. I think they're gonna cut the baby in the middle somewhere. I don't think they're gonna go all for the advocates at all, but I also don't think they're gonna go all for the cities. And by the way, to give you an idea, the fact that I'm involved with that and the mayor of San Francisco joined us in a friend of a court, that tells you how flipped on the head things have gotten. People are realizing we can't sustain encampments. Encampments aren't safe. They're not good for the community. And most importantly, they're not good for the people in the encampment experiencing. Here, back to, I know it sounds wet, make it easy to get treatment, hard to get high. You will not get treatment on a jail cell floor. If you get arrested, you won't get treatment there. You just won't. But you don't get treatment in an encampment or a park bench. You get in treatment when you're in a good program. You know, that's when you get, when you're in a good program, that's when you get treatment. So we need to be doing everything to get you in. So if I were your, I don't want to be mayor, you already have a mayor. I'm sort of, yeah, I hope you don't get mad at me at the next thing. If I were your mayor, I would ignore the Ninth Circuit, because the Ninth Circuit's only for the Ninth Circuit.
Sounds like a policy body decision.
Yeah, the Ninth Circuit is for Hawaii, Guam, I think Guam, Samoa, Washington, Seattle, parts of Idaho. You don't have to follow the Ninth Circuit. Now, here's why your attorney did that. I totally understand why they did. Because they're afraid to get sued. If you're afraid to get hurt walking across the street, don't walk across the street. This is not an easy business we're doing. For all of you, the fact you care for 2 hours, this is muddy, gritty, gray, hard. It's policing, it's mental health, it's substance abuse, it's broken families, broken divorce, and weird, crazy stuff that we can't even talk about, you know? And so, why would you follow the Ninth Circuit if you're not in the Ninth Circuit? I literally don't understand. But what an attorney will tell you is there's no controlling law, and the fact that the Supreme Court refused to hear it sort of implied consent, which they didn't, but it is implied, I get it. And so if you have a judge that's lazy, because no federal judges are lazy, a federal judge will pick up that case because it's easy to pick up. All the research is done, and they say, I'm just going to do what the Ninth Circuit said, and picks it up. The good news is somebody we were having this conversation this morning. The great thing that this issue is going to get solved in days. It's going in April it's going in front of the Supreme Court, and we'll have clear rules of engagement probably within 6 or 7 months. That finally. I wish they had taken it in 2019, they didn't. I wish judges, I had hoped there'd be somebody outside the circuit, like say the Fourth Circuit, a much more conservative circuit, to rule the other way where it forced the Supreme Court to take it. It's called a split decision, a conflicting decision. There's several different terms used. We have different circuits ruling differently, and then it forced the Supreme Court took it. But the good news, they finally took it. And we'll know in 6 or 7, 8 months what your rules are. And then whatever they are, then follow it. Because now the Supreme Court said so. If they tell me I'm crazy, then I am crazy, because they said I am.
So in the meantime, we could take it for a policy decision if we could show, like, between the PD and us, what it's doing for multiple different reasons.
Always start with, is it good for the person experiencing homeless? Is it good for the unhoused? Always start there.
Yep.
Always start there.
We can do something in the meantime, but then
Yeah,
follow it out.
start with what there and then work your way up. Yeah, somebody, I saw a new hand. Oh,
What?
your second hand.
Oh.
Second hand. Okay. Somebody, there you go.
You said it's gonna split the baby down the middle. What kind of tell us what you're seeing in the tea leaves?
It's never to be a good predictor of Supreme Court when you're not a lawyer. But I think what they're going to do is maybe change how the calculation is done, because some have interpreted it very strictly that says if you have 400 people experiencing homeless or unhoused, you have to have 401 units before you can do anything. That's the strict interpretation. My interpretation, by reading the Boise original decision, was if tonight we're cleaning up an encampment of 10 people, we need 11 beds tonight. See the difference? And so, and maybe some of this is wishful thinking, that they might change how we calculate. Also, there've been some interpretations in some locations where they say beds that are in the faith community don't count toward the number. So if you're a rescue mission or Salvation Army, you're not part of the government system, so we don't count your beds. And so to me, I think you need to use the local come as you are AHAR report, you know, your point in time with all, and use all availability. And so that might be another clarity where they might say it is totally, in the court, the actual case is mute about faith community counting beds. But some judges, local judges, have said, you're not part of the county mental health authority, you're not part of the city police department. They're the ones the parks are cleaning it, so it's how many city beds there are. I sort of see how they get there, but it's not a raw, and some judges have judged that, not all. So I think they might fiddle with the counting, is how I think they might do it. But if they do an all or nothing on either side, and for those of you following it, this is gonna be a huge case. And it's gonna be the case that nobody realizes was huge until it gets implemented. If they go all out on one side, it's, you have a personal right to live wherever you are, even if it's on somebody else's property, and you can't do anything about it. So it takes away the concept of criminal trespass. Would not exist. That's what the advocates want. What the conservative side wants is we can round anybody up anytime for any reason, period. And I think the court's gonna tie it somehow back to some sort of bed space. That'd be my guess. But the court is one person different than it was in 2019. So this side is more likely to happen than this side.